Hope everybody had a good lunch. I wanted to introduce a couple of our chefs. We got Javier, you all know Javier, and Alfredo Martinez is helping out today, so welcome, thank you, it was great, we appreciate it. And I also want to thank all the servers, y'all did a great, ladies, y'all did a great job, thank you. Thank you, Chef, thank you. Okay. It is absolutely my pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Major General Carla Hawley-Bowland, retired but MD. I think she's going to have a very interesting talk. She told me she was going to make it funny. I don't know. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Carla Hawley-Bowland. Turn that on for you, so you're all set.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I'm going to start this off like I used to when I commanded Tripler. I'm going to say a word and you're going to say it back to me. Aloha! Oh, you guys are wonderful. Usually people don't get that. And then we have to do it all over again. I get this little aloha. So you guys did great. Well, I'm happy to be here today. I'm going to talk about leadership and change, but I'm going to illustrate with some war stories. So hopefully it won't be dry. So we know that wherever you work, wherever you are, that everybody is working hard. They're trying to be more efficient, save money, improve quality. But the paradox of action is that you don't get success. Because you can't run faster and faster, better and better, leaner and leaner, meaner and meaner, forever. It's impossible. You only can get so far using that mentality. So let's talk how you change it. First, you have to see the box that you are in, and that is a face. It just doesn't show up very well in there. You need to know who you are, what your boundaries are, and what you have. And then you need to step outside your box. And you need to see what the options are, what the new rules are, and how your box is going to fit in. So then, will your box fit in intact and just be a building block of something bigger but look the same? Will it be taken apart partially, changed a little bit, remodeled into something else? Or will it be completely disassembled and reassembled into something totally different and unrecognizable than before, which is that blob on there. It's the best I can do with free art on the computer. But how does leadership bring about that change? Well, first we have to start with values. Now, the Army values is leadership. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. The civilian equivalents for that are usually, I've surveyed a bunch of them, and it's usually service, dignity, safety, integrity, and innovation are the common themes that they use. But values are the anchor. Superb patient care covers the most of it and treats the patient in the hospital. But the military also extends that back to saving that wounded warrior on the battlefield. And we bind the wounds of war. That's our primary mission. And this is a quote from Winston Churchill when he was a lieutenant in 1898 with the Malakand Field Force. And as the profession of medicine and surgery must also rank as the most noble that men and women can adopt. The spectacle of a doctor in action among soldiers in equal danger and with equal courage, saving life where all others are taking it, is one which must always seem glorious, whether to God or man. So, what do you do to change? Well, when I had command of the European Regional Medical Command, I placed the 30th Med Brigade under me instead of U.S. Army Europe. So I controlled both the brick and mortar as well as the operational deployable assets. That way I didn't need to go back to Army Medical Department every time I needed to shift assets, because that took forever. So what happened? We had the Pakistan earthquake in 2005. And they had no assets over there to deal with it. And they queried everyone who could send a hospital. And I had the 212th MASH who had just returned from Angola. They hadn't even unpacked yet. Their stuff was still packaged up. And I said, I can. We can send them in 10 days. We just have to restock them with medicine and all the bandages and everything else. And so we borrowed a 747 from the Russians, because that was the only plane available, an empty cargo 747. And we loaded them up, and I changed the troop list to an OBGYN because it was 10 days out. So they had survived the earthquake, and you were going to get long-term problems. And so I added an OBGYN to the list in substitution with a general surgeon. And I could do that because I owned all the assets. So I took an OBGYN from Landstuhl and put him in the troop list. And the first patient they saw was a postpartum hemorrhage. She walked in, bled all over. They thought if she was a casualty, she was a postpartum hemorrhage. So very efficient. We got them there in 10 days. Now I don't know what insect vectors they took from Angola to Pakistan, because we didn't unpack everything, but it worked. The other thing we did when I was in Europe was that we had a partnership with Germany and with the Sanitätskommando 2, which was their Army Medical Department. And we were supporting Iraq and Afghanistan. And we had surges. At that time, we would have between 5 and 98 casualties brought in every 24 hours. We knew ahead of time what we were getting because we were watching CNN just like all the rest of you. And we could surge between 5 and 30 ICU beds. And I could surge ICU nurses because I had 24 hours notice watching CNN again. And if we were going to get 98, I could surge 30 ICU nurses from across Europe. They would just get in their cars and come. And we could open up to 30 ICU beds. Now we had early criticism of the trauma care that we were providing at Landstuhl from the United States trauma surgeons. Now they were used to gunshot wounds, stabbings, car accidents. But they said we were doing it all wrong. We were leaving tourniquets on too long, everything else. And my poor surgeons, I mean, they were just working their hearts out. And they said, what do we do, ma'am? I said, bring them over. Bring them all over, invite them over. I will credential them. Since I'm the commander, I can just issue them credentials, and they can work alongside you and tell you what you're doing wrong. And I winked at them. I can't wink, but you know. And they went, got it. So we brought over 20 trauma surgeons, about 20, I don't remember the exact number, but we brought them over from the United States. And we put them in Landstuhl to work alongside to tell us what we were doing wrong. And that week we got slammed. And we were getting between 90 and 98 casualties every 24 hours. And you had to turn them over in 48 hours to go to Walter Reed or Brooke, because you had to empty out because they were still coming. And they got their eyes opened. They had never seen triple amputees with a head injury to stabilize. That kind of stuff. And going multiple times to the OR for washouts. Well, we need to say, no, you can't fix it now. You just have to stabilize. They get it fixed at Walter Reed. But we got our survival rates up where if you made it to the cash, well, forward surgical team, you had about a 95% viability where you would live. If you made it to Landstuhl, you were up to 96, 97. If you made it to Walter Reed, 98% would survive. And that's what I got us up to. All of a sudden they changed their tunes. They saw tourniquets left on for 2 hours, 3 hours. We never lost one limb because of a tourniquet. And they said, you guys are doing it right. And I knew that we made a difference, because I went to a trauma conference several years later when I was stationed elsewhere. And I was just in the audience and listening to some of the stories that they were telling from all over. And suddenly, they asked for questions at the end. And a woman stood up and said, "So what's the best trauma hospital in the United States?" And the guy that was up there, he was at Baltimore, and he said, "The Combat Support Hospital in Afghanistan." And I knew we won. So another rule, better is better. Better truly has to be better, not just faster, cheaper, and improved. You have to establish an edge, and you have to become something different. And it has to win. And the best example I have of this is the high jump, and I still remember this. I was a kid, but I remember this. High jump was stuck at 7 feet. Nobody could clear 7 feet until Dick Fosbury did his Fosbury flop in the 1968 Olympic Games in Mexico City. And I don't know if you knew it, but he was an engineering student. He was not a track star. But he did the calculations on what his body mass and where it was according to the bar, and he figured out that he could go higher with the flop. And he did it for the first time, and now it's over 8 feet. Because he did something different. So what happened in Europe? I had Italy that was doing all the inpatient care at Vicenza. We just had a clinic there. But for OB care, they were treating our patients as public patients. No pain management, no privacy, no anesthesia, and the ladies were miserable. And I had a 4-star general, B.B. Bell, who when I got there had his finger in my chest, right here. "Carla, you need to fix these labor patients, they're beating me up." "Yes, sir." Luckily I was OB. Luckily my Surgeon General was an OB. And so I built a birthing center in a temporary building in the parking lot. And I put an OB and anesthesia down there, and we pulled back all the laboring patients. Well, Italy was a little upset, but we were providing standard of care. And they said, okay, we'll give them private patient standards. And I said, oh no, we're keeping them, and we're building a permanent birthing center. But this will teach you, the rest of your care needs to meet our standards, or I will build it. And they believed me. So, true difference. Now, my last assignment was at Walter Reed. I had to close the old Walter Reed, open the new one at Bethesda, and open the new Belvoir before I retired. And I was known as the BRAC Queen, the Base Realignment and Closure Queen. And this was my mission, close all Walter Reed units by 15 September 2011. That was Congress mandate. I had to move all the personal equipment from Walter Reed and Bethesda to Bethesda and Fort Belvoir. I had to move all the inpatients from Walter Reed to Bethesda. We did that in one weekend, 98 patients in a rainstorm, thunder, lightning, and pouring rain. And we didn't lose one patient. I had to find 16 operating rooms at Bethesda. They said they had 16. My surgeons came back and said they lied. They're so small that the case cart has all the equipment is out in the hall. They can't fit it in the room, so you can only bring in what you're using, and the extras have to stay out and they have to keep running out of the room to get stuff. Okay, so I went over there, and I was on the team that was, merging all of this stuff, and I said, well, I'll go over and look at them. And they said, oh yeah, you used to operate. Well, they didn't know I was still operating. I used to escape to the operating room for stress management. That was my happy place. So I went over there, and everybody's putting on the white zoot suits, the cover-ups. But they said, well, since I was the commander of Walter Reed, they got me a pair of scrubs. Okay. And my aide, with his big backpack with the computers and all the stuff, pulls out my OR shoes, which happen to be bright orange plastic, so nobody can miss them. And they looked and they went, oh, you have shoes. Yes, I have shoes, which means she goes to the OR, like now. Oh. So then we marched down to the ORs. And the nurse is handing out foot covers and head covers, and she looks down and she goes, "Oh, you have shoes." Yes, I have shoes. I don't need foot covers. Oh. So then the chief of anesthesia comes out with his stack of briefs, and he glances at me and scrubs, and he looks down, he goes, "Oh, you have shoes." And he went as white as his briefing and knew he couldn't bullshit me anymore. So we said, "Well, let's go." And my aide pulls out his pad of paper and his pen. So we go to the first OR, which is the size of a closet. Well, this isn't big enough. This can't count as an OR. Second one, same size. "Oh, but you know, if we merge this one and this one, we could make it one OR. That would be big enough." And so my aide goes, -1. He's got 16 at the top. He goes -1. So we go to 3 and 4. 3's too small, 4's too small, -1. So now we're down to 14. Then we go to 5 and 6, same problem, -1. So now we're down to 13 ORs. So you really only have 13 ORs because the others were okay. So where do we get 3 ORs? So we get to the end of the hall and there's these 3 big OR suites. I said, "What is this?" "Well, that's infertility. They have to have a roof that goes to the outside air because of the embryos." "Oh, well, let's just take those 3. That gives us +3. We're back up to 16. "Yeah, but then we have to move infertility." "Well, that's fine. They don't need to be in the operating room." So guess where we moved them? The Naval Commander's Command Suite. It's the only place that had an outside roof that was big enough, so I stole it. So anyway, that's how we fixed that problem. We had to split the Warrior Transition Unit and move their families and them north and south. And then the last problem was moving my headquarters for the Regional Medical Command down to Belvoir. The problem was the engineers said, "Well, you have to stay at Walter Reed till end of October, first part of November, because your building isn't done." I said, "But I have to be out by 15 September 2011. That's congressional mandate. I can't break that. They're locking the gates. All the power goes off, the water goes off, all the utilities are turned out. I can't stay." "Oh, no, it won't be a problem." "Oh, yes, it will be a problem. Did you read the mandate?" "Oh, it'll be okay." "No, it won't." "Yeah, it'll be okay." So my staff were going, "What are we going to do?" I said, "Well, let's put on our battle rattle, get a bunch of GP larges and GP mediums, tables and hookups for the computer, and we'll run the extension cords out of the bottom of our building because the basement's done. And we'll just move in on the lawn next to our building. That'll be incentive for them to get the building done because we have to be out." So that's what we did. And we even put porta potties on the sidewalk. So we moved in August, and they got our building done about mid-October. But they got it done because they were embarrassed, very embarrassed. Okay, another rule, focus on the future. You want a positive, creative culture. You want one marked by optimism because it takes 13 positives to reverse 1 negative. And that's been proven. But if you take positives, they'll just keep taking you up the sine curve. And you have to convince your people that attitude is a choice. And if you go to work, you want a positive attitude instead of having a bad day. And it becomes contagious. And you need to learn by doing. You need to listen to your organization and then foster a dialogue so everybody understands how you are changing things, because then they can learn and become the entrepreneurs that will continue it. So, what did I do at Fort Leonard Wood? Well, I inherited, instead of 1 department of psychology and psychiatry, they had split with all the extra meetings and all the extra paperwork because they couldn't stand each other. So then I get a requisition. 1 owns the conference room and 1 owns the AV equipment. So they each asked for the stuff they didn't have. And of course, denied. And my deputy commander goes, "Oh, I'll take this one, I'll take this one, I'll take this one." As I told you, you get entrepreneurs if you treat your people right. So she goes down there and she calls them in the room, and we have psychiatry on this side, and we have psychology on this side, and they're glaring at each other. "What do you mean she denied it?" "Well, let me tell you," she says. "You have a conference room, you have AV equipment. You don't have a conference room, you don't have AV equipment. But the problem is the conference room and the AV equipment don't belong to you. They belong to the commander. The sandbox and the beach toys belong to the commander. Everything you needed to know you learned in kindergarten. Remember that book? Yeah. And if you don't share the sandbox and the beach toys, the commander will take them all away. They finally got it. Another thing is to grow people. You want a creative organization, and then you will be only limited by the collective imagination of all its constituents, and you will be amazed. At William Beaumont, we had a backup of malpractice cases because we had a retired JAG officer that was practicing in the civilian, and he would get on the courthouse steps every year and announce that he was suing William Beaumont Army Medical Center for 23 malpractice cases because he only had to sue one place so he could add them all up instead of individual hospitals and doctors. Now, he didn't win them all, but he never followed up with that soundbite that was on television. So I called my JAG officer because General Peake said, "Carla, you need to fix this." Yes, sir. Now, my JAG officer, my head lawyer, he was the worst personality disorder ever. He had been passed over for, for promotion and everything because nobody, just worst personality. I think he was on the spectrum. I mean, it's just awful. But he was a brilliant lawyer, and he loved malpractice cases. So I said, "Bring me a plan." He brought me a plan. He says, "I have to hire one civilian lawyer, and I'll clean it up." That's all he needed. Okay, go. He held that JAG officer to task, the retired one. If he missed a date, case thrown out. Missed a date, case thrown out, and the guy couldn't keep up. They were gone. It's down to 0. General Peake, "What's your process?" I said, "Jim McCormick, sir." "No, your process." "Jim McCormick, sir." He couldn't believe it was one person. He solved it. And then you need to reflect. What's happening? What's not happening? What's working? What's not working? How do I influence that situation? And you always keep looking throughout your organization. So you need to learn your organization. So when I used to go to appointments, myself, I used to get out of my uniform and dress in civilian clothes, put my hair down, and nobody knew who I was. And I'd walk in, I'd be sitting in the waiting room, and I'd just sort of be looking around, see what was happening, how they checked patients in, how they checked patients out, how it worked. And I saw a woman come out, and she went up to the front desk, and she goes, "They just started me on a new medication. They want to see me back in 3 months to see if it works. And I'm a businesswoman, and I'm out of town a lot, and I have my calendar right here, so I'd like to make that follow-up appointment." And the clerk looks up and says, "That's fine. You can call for your appointment." And she goes, "Yeah, but aren't you the clerk that makes the appointment?" "Yes, ma'am, and here's the phone number, and you just need to call." "But I have my calendar right here. Can we just make the appointment right now? Because I'm very busy." "Yes, ma'am, and there's a phone right out in the hall. You can call to make the appointment." "But again, aren't you the clerk that makes the appointment?" And then the magic words came out. "Ma'am, the rule is you have to call." And I could have hugged this lady. She reached in, and this was before everybody had a cell phone, okay? She reached into her purse, she pulled out her cell phone, and she called. And she says, "Now you'll make my appointment." So anytime you hear the rule is, that's an opportunity to change. So, am I doing okay on time?
Couple more minutes.
Okay. Well, I'm getting towards the end of my talk. So here's a few more tales from the vault. My Wounded Warriors of Walter Reed, one of my favorite assignments, because I'm working with all these wounded warriors. That's their last stop. They wore t-shirts. On the front it said "Missing Parts in Action." On the back, "Some assembly required." We also had visits from a lot of people. A memorable one was the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees. And the next day I was walking around and one of my soldiers, he was missing his artificial arm. I said, "Where's your arm?" He goes, "Well, ma'am, New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees." "Yeah." "Well, Drew Brees signed my arm." And I said, "Yeah." "Well, it's in laminating." And I said, "Am I paying for that?" He said, "Oh, ma'am, I should have asked. Please?" I said, "Okay." And then we had a picnic in front on the lawns at Walter Reed on Memorial Day. We had the Golden Knights jump in, had a big X on the lawn. They were all in. Well, one of the Golden Knights has an artificial limb, and they put the smoke on him because it gets hot on whoever's ankle it's on. So they put it on him because he can't feel it. And he was jumping, and all of a sudden we're watching, and his leg falls off. And it's going one way, and he's going another. So my medics came up to me, "We're getting crutches." "Okay, thanks," because he'll land on one leg. And then I sent my MPs, I said, "Follow that leg, because it's going to land somewhere, and I don't want it hitting anybody." And so he landed, stuck the landing, middle of the X on one leg, and then my guys ran out with the crutches. He goes, "Hey, thanks, guys." And then I got my walkie-talkie, went off, and they said, "Found the leg, top of the parking garage, landed on a car, dented in the hood, and broke the windshield." I said, "Okay, trace the car, find the owner, and we'll meet up and call his insurance company, because guess what? His insurance company is not going to believe my car's hood and windshield were broken by an artificial limb that fell out of the sky." And so we called him while he was up there, and they said, "Oh, no, you're kidding." And I said, "Here's the commander," handed me the phone, and I said, "No, that's really true, and if you give us the link, we'll send you the pictures." And they said, "You're kidding." So that was the talk of the insurance company. And then we had a female bilateral amputee. She's doing great. She's above the knee amputations, had her artificial limbs, but we give them, flat feet and little cute shoes like I'm wearing right now. And she's depressed. And I said, "What's wrong?" She goes, "I don't feel like a girl." "Well, how come?" Because they had her through psych and everything else. And I sat down and talked to her, and she goes, "I miss my 6-inch pumps, healed pumps." And she goes, "I just don't feel like a girl." I said, "Well, those would be really hard to walk in." She goes, "I know, but..." I said, "Well, if we made you some feet, do you want to try?" "Could you?" "Well, yeah, I don't know if it'll work, but you used to be able to walk in those. You got the balance right up here. I can't walk in those things anyway, but you could, so let's try it." Okay, so I had my prosthetist make her 2 feet. She brought in her red ones, her favorites, the red 6-inchers, and they made her feet. And I said, "You have to work on the parallel bars." I said, and they said, "Ma'am, this isn't going to work, or if it works, it'll take a year, 2 years." I said, "Well, let her try. She's miserable. You have to at least let her try." And I told her, I gave her a challenge. I said, "When you walk in them, I want you walking into my office." "Yes, ma'am." "That's an order." "Yes, ma'am." Guess how long?
2 weeks.
3 weeks. She didn't walk into my office. She strutted into my office with a smile from here to here. "I'm a girl now." And I don't know if any of you know Tammy Duckworth, the bilateral amputee. I mean, she had one leg that was the American flag, and the other one there's her National Guard unit. And we used to do jokes all the time. The advantages of having artificial limbs: you don't have to shave before you go to the beach. Don't get runs in your pantyhose. I mean, we had a whole routine down. And then we have, am I need to be done, or?
A little more.
A little more, okay.
Keep going.
Keep going. Well, we had the Malone House, which was a hotel that we put up the wounded warriors and their families. And at 2 a.m., Pete Corelli called me. "Carla." "Yes, sir." Woke me up. Well, it woke up my husband. I never hear anything. "It's for you." Clunk. "Carla, Corelli." "Yes, sir." "Miss Smith, room 321. "Yes, sir." "Air conditioner quit." "Yes, sir." "She called the president." "Yes, sir." "Call me when it's fixed." "Yes, sir." So then I call my Pete, the garrison commander, tell him the story. He goes, "But it's 3 in the morning. "She called the president." "Oh, got it, ma'am. We'll be right on it." So they went and fixed it. Now, why did she call the front desk of the Malone House? No, because of course the president would see all the patients when they were in the hospital and give out his card. Call me if you need it. So she called the president. So about an hour later, my Pete calls me, ma'am, it's fixed. Thanks, Pete. Then I call Corelli. Sir, it's fixed. Thank you. I'll call the president. Thank you, sir. That's what my life was like there. It was crazy. And then I also got complaints by people that were, trying to do the right thing. But Carla, you're not filling up the Malone House. You have empty rooms. And I got so tired of it that I just finally would answer, yes, I have too many right-sided toilets. Right-sided toilets? I said, well, yes. If you go into a bathroom and you're on the toilet, if your toilet is a right-handed toilet, you reach back and flush it with your right hand. If it's a left-handed toilet, you reach back and flush it with your left hand, right? Well, we happen to have right now more right-handed, right-armed amputees than left-armed amputees. And I have too many right-sided toilets. And if you're missing your right arm, you need a left-handed toilet to flush. Because otherwise, you have to stand up and you may be missing a few other limbs, like one leg or both, that you have to stand up, turn around, and the Malone House was built as a hotel, not for handicapped folks, so it's a little tight. Then you have to turn around to flush and bend over with your walker or whatever to flush the damn toilet. So I said, so right now I have too many right-handed toilets. The lefts are all full, yes, but I can't put anybody else in there because they're missing their right hand, so they need the left one. Oh, it's like, think. I mean, we put these people in these rooms specifically so it fits whatever they have missing. Missing parts in action, remember? Some assembly required. You don't want to have to put your limbs on to go to the toilet in the middle of the night. So, yeah. And then just some general stuff from the Army, because they weren't too used to female generals. As he said, I was the first doc. There just weren't that many of us around. And Ann Dunwoody, she was the first female 4-star in the Army. She's a lieutenant general at the time. And when we went to the dress blues as our everyday uniform instead of the greens, we got called into Casey's office before they were widespread making them. And he told us, he said, General Casey said, I want all of you generals to start wearing your dress blues just to socialize it with the Army. And Ann Dunwoody, she was a logistician. She owned warehouses. And she looked at me, and I looked at her, and I own hospitals, which have their own warehouses. And I said, I'll go, you back me up? She outranked me. She goes, yeah. So I go, no, sir. And he goes, Carla? And he looked at Ann, and she goes, why not? We don't have pants, sir. I said, Ann works in warehouses. She does not want to do her job in a skirt, hose, and high heels. Because right now, this is a dress uniform. And I'm running around a hospital and warehouses, and I don't want to do it in skirts, hose, and heels. Now you get us pants so we can wear our Oxfords, or we'll make a deal with you. We'll wear it if you make all the guys wear skirt, hose, and heels. And Ann Dunwoody goes, yeah. And the guys are going, oh, no way, no way. Because there are about 20 guys in the room and the two of us. And he goes, there's no pants with that uniform? Guys are clueless. I'm sorry, but guys are clueless. No, sir. Requires heels and hose. Oh. So we got pants moved up as the first production line item for all the girls. So we got that done. And then one last story, the Mommy General. When I was in Europe, they put out a query, I think it was April, that said, if any of you general officers have a kid deployed, let us know because they're doing a story about military families. Okay. Well, my son was an ambulance medic in Iraq. So I answered. That's what they said. So I answered. And then they didn't know what to do because they didn't know they had a mommy general. They thought all the female generals were either single or dinks, double income, no kids. When did she have time to have kids? It's like, I wasn't planning to be a general. I mean, when General Peake told me I'd been picked up because I was going on leave, I said, you're shitting me. I mean, I wasn't planning it, okay? And so, I ended up with 2 stepsons, a son and daughter of our own, and I've got 8 grandkids. I mean, we had family, and they didn't know what to do because they didn't tell us it was a Father's Day article that Newsweek was doing. Big on faith. So Newsweek, June of 2005, Scott and I are number 3. They put us in. So that was pretty fun. And I couldn't have gotten through my career, but I'll just tell one more. My husband, who was my wife, because when we went to baby general school, he had to sit in with all the wives, learning how to be a good wife, accessorize a black dress, to see what he could do with a tux. But Pete Pace, who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, he was a Marine, and I knew him from other dealings, and he came up to me so excited. He says, Carla, I just got done talking to your wife, and went on. He didn't even catch himself. We were trying to introduce husband, significant other, spouse. So I went to Warren, I said, that's it, you're an Army wife. So I bought him an Army wife pin, which he pinned on his desk, and he would introduce himself, I'm Carla's wife, I'm Carla's wife. He was such a good boy. So we're almost done. Carla's rules. You can't cure stupid. I just proved that, right? You have to stay flexible. You can't take it personally. It's just business. But you have to have fun, and that I did. So, this will go quick.
Go for it.
General Casey, my Chief of Staff of the Army, his leadership guidance was to rest every day. He wanted you to read, exercise, sleep, and think. And he said he didn't care what you read. It could be a romance novel, whatever. Mind candy is what we call those, because we know you guys read those spy novels, which is the same thing as a romance novel, and we know that, so okay, we got it. But he said even from those you'll get an idea on how to cure a problem. Well, I saw too many people live on Diet Coke, and that's all they ate. So I had to eat. So if you add that in, read, exercise, sleep, eat, and think, it spells reset. So you can reset every day. And if your belief system involves prayer or meditation, then you can be ready for the rest of your life because that spells preset for today and the future. So we can do it.
General, that was outstanding. There we go, we got it. Outstanding. Does anybody have any questions? We've got mics on either end. Any questions for Carla? None? She solved everybody's problems? And we've got a question over here. Hold on a second, we got a mic headed to you, John. This is a Marine, by the way, so...
Hey, Marine!
I see that you're a graduate of Creighton.
Yes.
I am a graduate of Creighton also.
Oh, great.
I'm just curious, what did you learn at Creighton that you took forward?
One was camaraderie. At Creighton, it's a Catholic school. The Army paid for it, thank goodness, no loans. But the spiritual guidance they gave helped me along, even though I'm not Catholic. But it helped because one of the things, when I was in the operating room, once you're teaching residents, you're like the last one down the line. The intern looks at the resident looks at you, and like, who's behind you to help out if you get into problems? There's nobody there but your spiritual guidance, and that helped a lot. Because everybody said when people get into trouble, lots of surgeons yell, scream, throw things. They said, you just get quiet. And I said, yeah, I'm just waiting for them to tell, him up there to tell me what to do. And then I reach back and say, give me this, 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 and this, and then I fix it. So, yeah.
Thank you, John. Any other questions? We've got a question over here.
Yeah.
General?
General, I've got to tell you, that was a great presentation. My name is Warren Patterson. I'm on the board of directors, and that was a phenomenal presentation. A couple of quick points. I worked for a guy a year after brigade command. I worked for a guy for a year as a special assistant. His name was Burwell Baxter Bell.
Yes.
BB Bell.
BB Bell.
So I understand exactly what you went through. He was a tough boss.
I
Very
loved him.
demanding, but I think I learned more from him in that 1 year, being on his hip, glued to him for a year as a special assistant. Your briefing had one thing for me that I really resonated with, and that is people first, mission always. So I could tell from the way you brief, you're about the soldiers and your patients, and I like to think I was the same way on active duty, so thanks for that leadership style. And the last thing I'll say is my daughter is a general surgeon, so I know what you went through on that track, because it's not easy for females because it is such a male-dominated track. And I saw you use the word attitude, and the last thing I'll say is I learned a long time ago, you can't control the things around you, but you can control your attitude. And if you take the letters in the word attitude and you put the corresponding numbers underneath, like A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, etc. You take the numbers in the word attitude, it's one of the few words that the numbers add up to 100. So attitude is 100% of all that we do. So I appreciate the fact that you said that, and I wish you all the best.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Warren. As Warren said, he is on the board of directors. He does a great job, and we appreciate it. Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Any other questions? Well, ma'am, I would like to give you one of our challenge coins
Oh, thank
from
you.
the Army residence community. We really appreciate you coming out. And no more questions. This meeting is adjourned. Very nice. Okay.